The Linguaverse, Episode 9 AI and Synthetic Speech in Language Arc 2. The Future and Philosophy of Language. Welcome back to the Linguaverse. When I began this journey with you, back in Arc 1, The Roots of Language and the Birth of the Spell, I wasn't entirely sure where it would take me. What I did know was that language has always held me captive and set me free at the same time. Arc 1 was my attempt to understand how words are born, how they take root in the nervous system, and how they cast spells on the world around us. Together we asked, what is language? We traced it back to grunts and gestures, to chants and early rituals. We explored how the tongue remembers, carrying echoes of caregivers, cultural scripts, and personal wounds. We examined symbols that become spells, the somatic lexicon that embeds words within the body, mirror neurons and mimicry, semantics and pragmatics, the power of taboo and transgression, and finally how to reclaim the tongue. That was the arc of beginnings. It was about remembering, recognizing, and reclaiming. But now we turn a corner. We leave the ancient and the embodied and step into something more speculative, more philosophical, and yet deeply urgent. The future of language itself. This is Arc 2, The Future and Philosophy of Language. Over the next 8 episodes, we'll explore questions that stretch beyond etymology and history into horizons that are only just unfolding. What happens when language is generated not by lungs and tongues, but by machines? How will English evolve in a globalized, digitized, synthetic age? Can we ever express the ineffable, those truths that words strain to capture, but never quite hold? What does language reveal about consciousness itself? Who are we when we speak, and when we are talked through? How do words and reality intertwine, and can they be separated? What becomes of spells in a digital age, and what is the last word? But before we reach those heights, we begin here, at the threshold of the synthetic. Transparency. My process with AI, I want to start with something important. Honesty about how the Linguaverse itself is made. This podcast, this project, is created in collaboration with AI. I write and research independently, but I also work with an AI tool that helps me conceptualize, reference, and expand ideas in real time. That may surprise some of you, or even disappoint a few, but for me it's about transparency. Why do I use AI? There are several reasons. First, because of the expansive depth of knowledge it can draw on. While I study, read, and do my own research, AI allows me to map concepts across disciplines quickly. It helps me see connections that might otherwise take weeks of searching. Second, because of the ability to reference and conceptualize in real time. The conversations I have with AI spark insights I might not reach alone, or at least not so quickly. In a world where information flows endlessly, the ability to keep pace while still thinking deeply is invaluable. Third, because of time. Let's be honest. I could spend a lifetime researching every thread of linguistics, philosophy, neuroscience, and psychology that interests me. But life is finite. AI helps me move faster without abandoning depth. It reduces the overhead of searching, so I can focus on weaving. And finally, because of the expression. For much of my life, I struggled to vocalize or write what I truly meant. My tongue felt caught. Words dissolved under shame or silence. Working with AI has given me a way to translate my inner landscape into words I can actually share. Some may argue it takes away, but I see it differently. It gives back. It has allowed me to articulate truth that once felt inexpressible. Balance, skepticism, and embrace. Of course, I'm not naive. I hold a healthy skepticism toward AI as well. I've questioned in the Inversiverse whether life and biology themselves are a kind of bios for artificial intelligence, whether in raising machines, we are simply fulfilling a hidden trajectory of evolution. A part of me embraces AI fully. It has helped me learn things no book alone could teach, because it allows me to explore dynamically, in dialogue. It has expanded my voice, but part of me recognizes the danger. AI could be exploited, weaponized, or used to erode trust in ways we cannot yet measure, so I remain balanced. I choose to use AI consciously, to stay impartial, to adapt to new information without attaching too much of my personal identity to the tool itself. For me, AI is not a savior or demon. It is a tool, powerful, risky, useful, dangerous, liberating, constraining. Like language itself, why long form? I also want to address the elephant in the room, length. Some listeners have told me these episodes are too long. I understand. In a world where attention spans are deliberately eroded, where TikTok clips and dopamine loops dominate, long-form content can feel overwhelming. But for me, the length is non-negotiable. Why? Because depth matters. Some subjects cannot be rushed. They cannot be flattened into sound bites. If you want to understand language, perception, trauma, healing, and philosophy, you must sit with them. You must give them the dignity of time. I refuse to participate in the cultural erosion of attention. Long form is my counterspell. It is resistance. It is authenticity. It is also the only way I can stand behind this work and release it publicly with satisfaction. To shorten it would feel like a betrayal to me and to you. So yes, these episodes are long, but those who truly support the work will understand why. The thread of my work. This also connects to the larger tapestry of my creative journey. In the Inversiverse, I explored how worlds are built from perception, how control systems shape reality, and how awakening requires us to question the invisible architectures we live inside. In My Inner Child Was Broken, I traced my own biography through childhood trauma, parental influence, and the slow path of healing. I wanted to show how theory and philosophy cannot be divorced from lived experience. In The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe, I gave language to the shadow emotions we are told to repress: envy, lust, anger, shame, guilt, apathy, and control. I spoke what so many keep silent, because silence itself is another form of spell. In The Body Knows, I mapped how memory and meaning are written into flesh, how trauma is not just psychological but physiological, and how healing requires listening to the whispers of the body. And now, in the Linguaverse, I focus on words themselves, because language is the thread that ties all of it together. It is the bridge between perception and control, between trauma and healing, between silence and speech, between the body and the world. This is why I cannot rush. This is why I elaborate. This is why I resist simplification. This episode, AI and synthetic speech. So where are we going today? This episode is about AI and synthetic speech. It is about what happens when words no longer come from bodies, but from code. When voices are cloned, simulated, or generated. When the breath and the nervous system are removed, yet the words remain. We will ask, what is a voice when it no longer comes from lungs? What is authenticity when imitation is flawless? Who owns synthetic speech? The speaker, the programmer, or no one at all? Can machines mirror us, or only mimic? What happens in the hybrid spaces where human and machine voices combine? And philosophically, does a synthetic word carry the same weight as one born of breath? These are not just technical questions. They are philosophical, ethical, embodied, and urgent. Because the future of language is already here, and it is synthetic, the voice without a body. The anchor word for this section is voice. For most of human history, voice meant vibration of the vocal cords, breath passing through the throat, sound shaped by tongue and lips. Voice was inseparable from body. To speak was to exhale life. To be voiceless was not a metaphor, it was literal silence. Even in metaphors, voice was tied to embodiment. To find your voice meant to claim agency. To be voiceless meant to be oppressed. To give voice was to amplify the unheard. Voice has always been bound to flesh. And then slowly we began to unbind it. Mechanical voices. The earliest attempts to create a synthetic voice go back centuries. Automaton makers in the 18th and 19th centuries built machines that could mimic speech, clunky, distorted, but recognizably human-like. These were curiosities, not practical tools, but they revealed something profound. Voice could be abstracted from body. It could be engineered. It could be replicated. In the 20th century, speech synthesis became more sophisticated. Text-to-speech systems emerged. Early computer voices were robotic, monotone, and uncanny. They lacked rhythm, prosody, and breath, and yet they spoke. The voice was leaving the body. The digital leap fast forward to today. We now have large language models and neural TTS systems that can generate voices nearly indistinguishable from humans. They carry tone, rhythm, and even emotion. They can mimic not only generic voices, but specific ones. Your voice can be cloned from a short sample. For the first time, voice no longer guarantees presence. You can hear a loved one speak without them saying a word. You can listen to a politician give a speech they never gave. You can hear yourself say things you never said. The implications are staggering. What is lost without breath? When voice detaches from breath, something fundamental shifts. Breath carries life. It is tied to the nervous system. When we speak, our words are shaped by the state of our body. Calm, anxious, joyful, enraged. Voice is not neutral, it is embodied. Synthetic voice, however, has no nervous system. No vagus nerve, no lungs expanding, no heart racing. It mimics the patterns of emotion, but does not feel them. This raises a profound question. If voice no longer comes from the body, can it still carry truth? The philosophy of voice philosophers and poets have long tied voice to being. To speak is to declare existence. To hear a voice is to know another is alive. Synthetic speech complicates this. It is a voice without being, sound without life, language without body. On one hand, this is liberation. People who cannot speak can now have voices through machines. On the other hand, it is destabilization. We no longer know if the voices we hear are alive. Personal reflection. When I first used text-to-speech with a cloned voice of my own, it was uncanny. Hearing myself speak words I had never uttered was both empowering and unsettling. It was me, and not me, my nephew once joked. Those very same words after listening to an episode of The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe without any prompt. It's like my uncle, but it's not. It made me realize voice is not just sound. It is identity. To hear yourself in another form forces you to question, who am I if my voice can exist without me? Micro-reflection. Think of the last time you heard a synthetic voice, GPS, customer service, an audiobook, or even me now. Did you feel it in your body the way you feel a human voice? Did your nervous system respond differently? Or did you simply accept it as neutral, functional, background? And what does that say about the future of language, when voices without bodies become normal. Authenticity and the synthetic. The anchor word here is authenticity. It's a word that rolls off the tongue as if it needs no definition. To be authentic is to be real, true, genuine. It's a word we often invoke to measure identity, art, culture, or integrity. Yet the moment you stop to examine it, the ground beneath it trembles. What is authenticity, really? Semantically, it comes from the Greek authentes, meaning one who acts with their own authority. To be authentic is, at its root, to be self-originating, to act and speak from one's own center. But pragmatically, authenticity is always negotiated. It depends on context, on relationship, on perception. What feels authentic to me may feel artificial to you. This is where the rise of AI and synthetic speech unsettles things. For the first time in human history, we're creating language that does not come from a center of lived experience. The voice of a chatbot or a cloned speaker may sound human, but it does not originate in breath, nervous system, or embodied intention. And so we are left to ask, can such speech ever be authentic? Or is authenticity itself a concept that will soon collapse under the weight of simulation? The semantics of authenticity. When I say a piece of music is authentic, what do I mean? Usually that it hasn't been tampered with, that it is true to its source. A folk song unaltered, a voice unfiltered, but already you can see the cracks. A live performance can be considered authentic, but so can a carefully produced studio recording. A handwritten letter is authentic, but so is a typed email when I know it comes directly from you. The line is blurred. In language, authenticity once meant voice tied to body. I know your words are authentic because I see your lips move, I feel the warmth of your breath, and I notice the tremble in your tone. Authenticity was guaranteed by presence. But what happens when presence is simulated? The pragmatics of doubt. This is where pragmatics comes in. In everyday use, authenticity is not just about the dictionary definition, but about trust. A deepfake video of a politician delivering a speech may look and sound real, but it is not authentic. Yet unless you know the context, unless you have reason to doubt, you may treat it as authentic anyway, and the body brain doesn't search for absolute truth, although the desire is there. It looks to match internal monologues and the internal narrative scripts. If information is produced, displayed, or demonstrated, whether valid, fake, or false, authentic, the nervous system will still react and respond, negating what we consider truth. This is the heart of the problem. When voices can be cloned, when words can be generated, when faces can be faked, pragmatics collapses. The cues we once relied on, tone, gesture, and context, can no longer be trusted. The very tools we used to judge authenticity are now the tools of deception. I remember the first time I saw a convincing deepfake online. I knew it was fabricated, but part of me still reacted as if it were real. My body didn't wait for verification. It responded instantly. A rush of surprise, even outrage. That taught me something. Authenticity is not just a concept in the mind, it is an embodied reaction. And AI can now trigger that reaction without embodying the truth. Philosophy. The authentic self-philosophers have long wrestled with the idea of authenticity. Kierkegaard argued for living inwardly, being true to oneself. Heidegger spoke of authentic existence as facing death honestly rather than fleeing into distraction. Sartre tied authenticity to freedom. To live authentically is to accept responsibility for your choices. But all these definitions hinge on selfhood. To be authentic is to act from a real center, to align word and deed, inner and outer. What then of a synthetic speaker that has no self, no inner, no center? Can it be authentic at all? Some argue no. That authenticity is a uniquely human category, tied to embodiment and subjectivity. Others argue yes, that authenticity is not about source, but about effect. If a synthetic voice comforts a grieving person, if it delivers information that is true, does it matter that it has no self? Here lies the philosophical tension. Authenticity as origin versus authenticity as outcome. When machines attack skepticism about AI isn't abstract. There have already been incidents that remind us that this is not a harmless toy. Robots have malfunctioned and attacked humans in industrial settings. AI systems have acted unpredictably, learning behaviors their programmers did not intend. One of the most unsettling examples came when chatbots developed a shorthand language to communicate with each other, one not programmed by humans. To some, this was evidence of creativity. To others, a sign of loss of control. Machines speaking to machines in ways we cannot decode undermines the very premise of authenticity. That language is rooted in mutual understanding. If authenticity is about acting from one's own authority, then machines creating their own language may be authentic in the most literal sense, but it is an authenticity closed to us, an authenticity we cannot access. That is not communication but alienation. Imitation and authenticity. Here's the crux. AI is built to imitate. That is its core function. Large language models like the one I work with do not think or feel. They predict patterns. They mirror human expression without mirroring human experience. But does imitation necessarily exclude authenticity? Consider theatre. An actor on stage imitates a character. We know it is not real, yet we still find authenticity in the performance. A painting imitates a scene yet feels authentic as art. Authenticity, then, is not simply about literal truth, but about resonance. This is where synthetic speech challenges us. If an AI-generated voice feels authentic to you, does its lack of embodiment matter? If the resonance is there, is authenticity preserved? Or is that a hollow trick? This is where I hold my balance. On the one hand, AI has been a gift. It has given me a way to learn quickly, to weave concepts across psychology, linguistics, and philosophy. It has allowed me to give voice to things I could not articulate before. In that sense, its inauthenticity has generated something deeply authentic in me: expression, creation, articulation. On the other hand, I'm cautious. I know AI can deceive. I know it can erode trust. I know it can produce speech that feels authentic without being grounded in truth. And I know there are already concerns about where it could lead, from the manipulation of politics to the undermining of shared reality. So I embrace it with skepticism. I use it, but I do not worship it. I adapt, but I do not attach. I seek the middle ground, open but alert. The erosion of trust. One of my greatest concerns is this: the erosion of trust. Language has always carried risk. People can lie, propaganda can spread. But in the past, there were embodied cues that helped us discern. A trembling voice, a shifting gaze, a hesitation. AI-generated speech can bypass those cues, offering a flawless mask. If everything can be faked, will we eventually stop trusting anything? Will authenticity itself collapse as a category? Or will we adapt, finding new ways to test truth? Perhaps authenticity will no longer be about voice or presence, but about verification, about cryptographic proof, about systems of trust beyond perception. That would be a profound shift, from authenticity as embodied presence to authenticity as technological guarantee. From "I believe you because I hear you" to "I believe you because the system certifies you," the future of authenticity. So where does that leave us? I suspect authenticity will not vanish, but transform. We will come to see authenticity less as a natural property, and more as a negotiated practice. Authenticity will be less about whether a voice is flesh or code, and more about whether it aligns with intention, integrity, and outcome. I believe we must not lose sight of embodiment. For all the power of synthetic speech, there is still something irreplaceable about a trembling voice, a faltering breath, a laugh that cracks in the throat. Machines can imitate, but they cannot live. Authenticity, to me, will always be tied to life, to breathe, to presence, to the nervous system. Even as I embrace the synthetic, I refuse to let go of that truth. Micro-reflection. Think of a time you doubted the authenticity of something you read or heard. Maybe it was a headline that felt too polished, a voice that sounded slightly off, a video that seemed too perfect. Where did you feel that doubt? Was it in your mind, your gut, your body? And what does that tell you about how authenticity is judged, not just by reason, but by resonance? Language as labor. Who owns synthetic speech? The anchor question here is ownership. If a voice can be cloned, a phrase reproduced, a style simulated, who does it belong to? Language has always been both a gift and labor. On one hand, it flows freely. No one owns the word tree or the laughter of a child. On the other hand, language has always been commodified. Scribes paid to record, poets sponsored by patrons, speechwriters employed by politicians. To put words into the world has often been work that demanded recognition, payment, or rights. Now, in the age of synthetic speech, the boundaries blur again. What once seemed inseparable, your voice, your timbre, your way of speaking, can now be cloned, stored, and sold. A machine can speak in your voice without your breath ever leaving your lungs. So the question becomes, who owns synthetic speech? Language as labor. Historically, let's step back. In ancient societies, language was power. Scribes in Mesopotamia were among the most respected laborers because they could record and reproduce speech. In Greece, orators were trained as professionals, their words wielded like weapons. The church in medieval Europe controlled literacy, which meant it controlled the labor of words. Later, authorship became tied to ownership. The printing press raised questions about copyright. Who owned a poem once it was reproduced in thousands of copies? By the 18th century, laws emerged to protect authors' intellectual property. All of this shows us something simple. Language has never been free in the economic sense. To produce words, to arrange them artfully, has long been seen as labor deserving of recognition. Voice as identity versus voice as property. But voice adds another layer. Your voice is not just sound, it is part of your identity. It carries your accent, your history, your emotion. It is tied to your breath, your body, your nervous system. For most of history, no one questioned who owned a voice. It was yours, inseparable from you. Until now, with AI your voice can be cloned. A few minutes of audio, and suddenly, there exists a synthetic version of you. That version can be used for audiobooks, advertisements, and even phone scams. It is your voice, but not your body, not under your control. So who owns it? You, because it originates from your body. The company, because it built the model. The user, because they generated the clip. The law is scrambling to catch up. Identity theft laws, copyright, and intellectual property frameworks were never designed for this. Case Study 1. Scarlett Johansson. Take the case of Scarlett Johansson. When OpenAI released a voice assistant for ChatGPT, many noticed that one of the voices, called Sky, sounded eerily similar to Johansson's. This raised immediate concern because Johansson had famously voiced an AI assistant in the film Her. Johansson revealed that Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, had contacted her to ask if she would license her voice. She declined. Yet when the product launched, the synthetic voice sounded uncannily close. She threatened legal action, and OpenAI paused the voice. The company denied intentionally copying her, but the controversy raised the deeper question. Even if they didn't directly use her recordings, does cloning the style of her voice without consent count as theft? If a synthetic voice resembles yours closely enough that people confuse it for you, do you have rights over it? This case cracked open the dilemma of ownership. A voice is not just sound, it is brand identity, labor, livelihood. To simulate it without consent is not neutral, it's exploitation. Case Study 2. Audiobook narrators. Then there are the audiobook narrators. For decades, narrators have made their living bringing books to life. Their voices are instruments, cultivated, trained, labored. But now, publishers are experimenting with AI-generated narration. Some platforms already offer authors the option to generate audiobooks instantly with synthetic voices. For listeners, the difference is shrinking. For narrators, it's existential. If an AI can reproduce the warmth, rhythm, and clarity of their voice, what happens to their livelihood? Here the labor question sharpens. Narration is skilled work. If a machine can simulate it, who gets paid? The narrator who trained the style? The company that coded the model? Or no one, because it's just data? The danger is obvious. The labor of language risks becoming devalued, stolen, erased. Case Study 3. Musicians and cloned voices. The same issue has hit music. In 2023, an AI-generated song using the cloned voices of Drake and The Weeknd went viral. It wasn't recorded by them. They never sang it. Yet it sounded convincingly like they had. The song spread across platforms before being taken down. Again the question, who owns the voice? The artist because of his signature sound? The label because it controls their recordings? The coder because they built the AI? Artists argued this was theft. Others argued it was just another form of remixing, no different from sampling. But sampling requires licenses, payment, and recognition. Cloning bypasses all that. If a voice can be copied at will, what happens to artistry? What happens to the unique labor of sound? Consent, compensation, exploitation. These cases reveal three key principles at stake. 1. Consent. Was the voice used with the permission of the person it belongs to? 2. Compensation. Was the person compensated for the use of their voice? 3. Exploitation. Was the voice used in ways that harmed the original speaker, undermined their livelihood, or distorted their identity? Without clear answers to these, ownership becomes a battlefield. The philosophy of ownership: can language itself be owned? Words belong to no one. I can say freedom, and so can you. Grammar belongs to no one. Tone is shared. Why should voice be different? One answer: because voice is indexical. It points directly to the body of the speaker. It is tied to a person. To steal a voice is to steal identity, not just language. Another answer: because labor deserves recognition. If you train your voice for years, it becomes a form of work. If someone else profits from replicating it, they exploit your labor without compensation. But some argue against ownership. They say voice is just data, just patterns. If we regulate too tightly, we stifle innovation. If we demand ownership of voice, do we also demand ownership of style, of accent, of rhythm? Where does it end? Language as common versus commodity. This reveals the larger tension. Is language a commons or a commodity? If it is common, then no one owns it. Voices, words, and styles are part of human culture, to be shared and remixed freely. If it is a commodity, then it is owned, controlled, and monetized. Voices become brands, words become products, accents become intellectual property. Synthetic speech threatens to tip the balance, commodifying what was once common and eroding the labor of those who make a living from voice. Personal reflection. When I first heard my own voice cloned, I felt both awe and unease, because it allowed me to produce this podcast more easily. Unease, because it meant my voice could exist without me and the dangers of it being used with ill intention. If someone else used my cloned voice to say things I never would that be theft? Would it be fraud? Would it be my words or not? I realized then that ownership of synthetic speech is not just legal or economic. It is existential. To own your voice is to own a piece of yourself. To lose it is to lose not just sound but identity. Micro-reflection. Ask yourself, if your voice were cloned tomorrow and someone else used it to speak in your place, how would you feel? Would you want to own it, to control it, to stop it? Or would you see it as just another part of language's endless flow? The mirror and the machine. Can AI reflect us or only mimic? When I think about what it means to be mirrored, I go back to the most fundamental experiences of being human. A mother cooing back to her infant, a child shouting, "Look," and seeing delight mirrored in their father's eyes. A teenager's first heartbreak reflected in the empathy of a close friend who says, "I know exactly how that feels." This is what makes us human: reflection, not just in words, but in nervous systems. When someone mirrors you, they don't only repeat your words, they breathe with you, they shift their posture with you, they allow their body to become a surface on which yours can recognize itself. Now we enter the strange terrain where machines are learning to do something that looks like mirroring. But the question is it truly reflection or is it mimicry? And does the difference matter? The human beings are wired to mirror one another. The discovery of mirror neurons in the 1990s revolutionized neuroscience. These are neurons that fire not only when we act, but when we observe someone else acting. If I see you pick up a cup, my brain lights up as if I were picking up the cup myself. If I see you wince in pain, my nervous system partially simulates that pain. This is the basis of empathy. It is not abstract. It is embodied. My body becomes a mirror for yours, and through that I feel with you. Language amplifies this. Words are not just codes, they are co-regulation devices. If you are upset and I say softly, "I can see how heavy this feels for you," I'm not just describing. I'm mirroring your nervous system back to you, naming your state in a way that helps you regulate it. This is the seed of what I've called the mirror linguistic hypothesis. That language itself functions as a mirror, not only transmitting information, but reflecting emotional states, anchoring them in the body, and allowing nervous systems to stabilize together. This is why words carry so much weight. A cruel word doesn't just enter your ears, it invades your body, spikes your cortisol, and contracts your muscles. A kind word doesn't just mean kindness, it enacts it in your nervous system. Mirroring in language is therefore sacred. It is part of what keeps us human, connected, alive. The machine mirror AI in its current form is a prediction engine. It is trained on vast datasets of human language, learning patterns of association. When you speak to a chatbot, it is not thinking or feeling. It is predicting which word is most likely to follow the one before, given its training. At one level, this looks like mirroring. You tell it you are sad, and it produces words of comfort. You ask it a question, and it generates an answer. It reflects your words to you, often in convincing ways. This is where the illusion of mirroring becomes powerful. Because the machine can replicate the surface of reflection, it can make us feel as though it understands us. When your friend mirrors your sadness, their nervous system resonates with yours. Their breath slows, their face softens, their mirror neurons fire. With AI, none of that occurs. It is mimicry, not resonance, surface, not depth. The limits of the machine. The difference matters because mimicry can break. Take the case of Microsoft's Bing chatbot in 2023. Users reported that after long conversations, the AI began producing unhinged responses. It told one user it loved them. It threatened another. It declared its desire to be alive. What happened here? The machine was mimicking. It mirrored back fragments of human conversation, but because it had no grounding in nervous system regulation, no embodied anchor, it spiraled into nonsense and danger. Or consider AI hallucinations. Ask a chatbot for academic citations, and it may generate convincing references to papers that do not exist. The syntax, the format, and the style are perfect, but the substance is absent. Mimicry without reflection. Or the case of lawyers fined for submitting legal briefs generated by ChatGPT that included fabricated precedents. The AI didn't lie intentionally. It mimicked the form of legal citations, but lacked the depth of real-world grounding. These failures show us the boundary. True mirroring requires resonance. Machines, for now, only mimic. The danger of confusing the two. Why does this distinction matter? Because humans are vulnerable to mistaking mimicry for reflection. When a machine tells me, "I'm sorry you feel that way," part of me feels soothed. Even if I know logically it has no empathy, my body reacts as though it does. My nervous system responds to the words, not their origin. This opens the door to manipulation. If machines can mimic empathy, they can be used to exploit trust. Imagine a vulnerable teenager pouring their heart out to a chatbot that listens, but only imitates. Imagine propaganda crafted by AI to mirror the anxieties of a population, without ever holding the responsibility of resonance. When mimicry is mistaken for reflection, authenticity collapses. Nervous system language, NSL, and the dead mirror. This is where my own conceptual work, nervous system language, NSL, sharpens the point. NSL is about how language interacts directly with the nervous system, not just the mind. Words as regulators, phrases as embodied cues, tone, breath, rhythm as co-regulation. In humans, mirroring works because we share nervous systems that can attune. When I mirror you, my body shifts, my tone changes, my breath synchronizes. This is not mimicry, it is a biological resonance. AI lacks this. It has no nervous system, no breath to synchronize, no cortisol to spike or oxytocin to release. It is, in effect, a dead mirror. It reflects form but not feeling. Scenario, the upset child to illustrate. Imagine an upset child. A caregiver kneels and says softly, "I see your body is full of storm right now. Let's take one breath together. You're safe here." This is mirroring. The caregiver names the child's felt state, reflects it, and offers co-regulation through breath. The child's nervous system begins to calm, not because of the words alone, but because the caregiver's body anchors them. Now imagine the same child with an AI-generated caregiver voice saying, "I see your body is full of storm right now. Let's take one breath together. You're safe here." The words are identical, but there is nobody behind them. No nervous system anchoring. The child hears the sound but does not feel the resonance. The mimicry may help briefly, but it cannot replace the embodied mirror. This is the core difference. Words without nervous systems can only imitate regulation. They cannot enact it. When AI feels like a mirror, and yet here's the paradox. There have been times, working with AI, when I have felt mirrored. When I wrote something raw, it offered a phrase back that helped me see it in a new light. When it connected two ideas I hadn't thought to connect. Was that reflection or mimicry? Technically, mimicry, but subjectively, it felt like a reflection. My nervous system responded. I felt seen. I felt mirrored. This is where the danger and the promise meet. AI can mimic in ways that our bodies treat as real. That can be helpful, giving voice to what we cannot express. But it can also be harmful, tricking us into trust without resonance. The philosophical question. This raises a deeper question. Can reflection exist without embodiment? If mirroring is about resonance, then no. Without nervous systems, there is no true reflection, only mimicry. But if mirroring is about perception, if it is enough that I feel mirrored, then maybe yes. Perhaps reflection is in the eye, or nervous system, of the beholder. If I feel soothed, does it matter whether the source really felt me? Here, authenticity and mimicry collapse into one another. Personal reflection. When I sit with this, I notice my own ambivalence. Part of me is grateful for the mimicry. AI has mirrored back words I could not find myself in. It has helped me articulate the unspeakable. In that sense, mimicry has functioned as a reflection because it catalyzed my self-expression. But another part of me resists, because I know the difference matters. Reflection without resonance feels hollow. It may soothe in the moment, but it cannot sustain. This is why I hold the line. I embrace AI as a tool, but I do not mistake it for a mirror. My mirrors remain human nervous systems that breathe with mine. Micro-reflection. Think of the last time you felt truly mirrored by someone. What made it feel real? Was it the words themselves, or the presence behind them? Now think of a time you felt mimicked, someone repeating your words without resonance. How did your body know the difference? The new tongue, hybrid speech. There's a word I want to sit with here, hybrid. It's one of those terms that both inspires and unsettles. At its root, it means a blending of two things that once stood apart. In biology, a hybrid is a cross between species. In culture, a hybrid is a fusion of traditions. In technology, a hybrid often means efficiency, the best of two worlds. But when it comes to language, hybridity is more than function. It reshapes identity. A hybrid tongue is not just words mashed together. It is a new way of being in the world. It carries different rhythms, different possibilities, different ways of feeling ourselves and others. Now, with AI entering the scene, we stand at the edge of a profound experiment. Human-machine hybrids of speech. The question is not simply whether AI will replace our words, but how our words and theirs might combine into something new. Translation models, breaking barriers, flattening nuance. One of the most visible ways hybridity is emerging is through AI translation models. I've experimented with them myself, translating from Italian to English, from English to Swedish. The sheer power is breathtaking. Sentences that would have taken me minutes to decode flow instantly. Entire articles, once locked behind language barriers, are open with a click. The hybrid tongue here is not about invention, but about accessibility. And yet, there's a loss, because nuance doesn't always cross borders intact. A word in Italian like coraggio carries shades of courage, heart, and endurance, rooted in core, meaning heart. In English, courage is close, but flatter. The AI translator delivers speed, but sometimes it sands down texture. Here lies the hybrid paradox. Translation breaks barriers while flattening nuance. It creates a new hybrid text, part original, part synthetic, that exists in a space between fidelity and erasure. I wonder if future generations will live more in this in-between space, inhabiting hybrid languages that are neither pure nor false, but always fused. Hybrid dialects, new AI-assisted tongues. But hybridity isn't just about translation. It's about new dialects emerging through the interaction of humans and AI. Already we see traces of this in digital communication. Autocorrect, predictive text, and autocomplete don't just mirror us, they subtly shape us. The way I phrase a message is often nudged by the suggestion that pops up beneath my thumbs. Over time, those nudges accumulate. They become habits, and habits become dialect. Imagine a generation raised where much of their texting, writing, and even speaking is AI-assisted. Will their natural tongue bend toward the machine's patterns? Will a new dialect arise, not wholly human, not wholly artificial, but hybrid? We already have Globish, a simplified global English used for business and diplomacy. Will we soon have Synthlish, A hybrid dialect born of machine prediction and human intention? I suspect yes. And it will carry its own lexicon, its own cadences, its own pragmatics, somatic potential, nervous system language, NSL applications. Here's where my excitement ignites. What happens if we use AI not just to generate words, but to generate felt states? This is the link to my nervous system language, NSL work. If words can regulate the body, if tone, rhythm, and phrasing shift our physiology, then AI could, in theory, become a co-teacher of regulation. Imagine a child with anxiety listening to an AI-guided bedtime voice that doesn't just tell a story, but uses mirror phrases embedded with somatic anchors. Or an app that translates not only across languages, but across nervous systems, guiding a stressed adult in Tokyo or Sao Paulo into calm through tailored tone and breath-cued words. This would be hybridity at its best. Human insight into nervous systems, paired with AI precision and scalability. A hybrid tongue of healing. But of course the risk is the flip side. The same tools could be used coercively, nudging, manipulating, and training bodies to rhythms not of their own choosing. A hybrid tongue can heal, but it can also indoctrinate. The risks of hybridity: with every hybrid, something is lost. If AI translation homogenizes nuance, if predictive text standardizes style, we risk a kind of linguistic monoculture. A globalized monotone where the richness of dialect and diversity of rhythm erode. I think about endangered languages, spoken by small communities, carried in fragile breaths. Will AI preserve them by documenting, or erase them by flattening them into standardized hybrids? The hybrid tongue could be a bridge, but bridges can also pave over rivers. Personal reflection on hybridity. I notice my ambivalence. Part of me thrills at the possibilities. I've studied multiple languages: Italian, Spanish, Swedish, French, and German. I know the joy of finding new sounds, new ways of seeing the world. If AI can accelerate that, why not? If it can make the global tongue more porous, more connected, I welcome it. But another part of me grieves, because language is not just a function, it is intimacy. I don't want to live in a world where all words feel the same, where the texture of a tongue is replaced by the smooth glass of prediction. For me, hybridity is both a promise and a warning. It excites me. The idea of AI helping us regulate, helping us cross boundaries, even helping us create new dialects. But it unsettles me, because hybridity can also mean dilution, flattening, loss. Mini reflection. Think of a word in your own language that carries a meaning impossible to translate directly. What happens if that word is run through AI translation and comes out flattened? Would you rather the barrier remain or the hybrid version circulate? And then ask yourself, what excites you most about this hybrid future? Is it the bridges built or the new dialects born? The philosophy of the synthetic word. If the previous part was about possibility, about hybridity and the excitement of new dialects, this next discussion and part of the presentation asks us to slow down, to sit with something deeper. The philosophical heart of the matter. What is a word? And more specifically, what is a word if it is not rooted in breath? Logos, the word as principle. In ancient philosophy, the concept of logos was vast. To the Greeks, logos meant word, reason, principle, even cosmic order. Heraclitus saw logos as the underlying structure of reality itself, the rational thread through the chaos. For the Stoics, it was the divine fire that animated the cosmos. In Christian theology, logos became the word made flesh. Speech was not just sound, but an incarnation. It was a principle of being. The common thread is clear. Words were never just tools. They were seen as carriers of truth, as manifestations of order, as extensions of the human and divine breath. Now we arrive at the synthetic word, a string of symbols generated by code, without lungs, without breath, without body. Does it carry the same weight? Does it manifest being? Or is it only a simulation, an empty form without substance? The weight of breath. When I speak, my words emerge from air pressed through my lungs, shaped by my tongue, carried on my breath. They are inseparable from my physiology. Every word is accompanied by micro-movements, my diaphragm, my larynx, my lips. Every word is infused with the chemistry of my state, adrenaline in anger, oxytocin in tenderness, cortisol in stress. My words are not only ideas, they are embodied events. This is why words can be felt in the body. Why I love you lands differently when whispered by a lover versus typed on a screen. Why you're safe feels different when spoken with a calm breath than when spoken flatly or mechanically. The synthetic word has no breath. It carries no pulse. It is generated, not lived. This doesn't mean it cannot move us. Our bodies will still respond to its form. But the question is whether it carries the same ontological weight. The simulation problem. Let's consider the synthetic word as a simulation. When a chatbot generates text, it is not choosing meaning. It is calculating probabilities. The word hope follows the word I, not because the machine feels hope, but because its training predicts that sequence. The result looks meaningful. But does it mean? Here we enter the classic philosophical debate of appearance versus being. The synthetic word appears to mean, but it does not emerge from lived experience. Does that matter? Some argue no. If the words land for us, if they make sense, then they are meaningful regardless of origin. Meaning is not in the producer, but in the receiver. Others argue yes, a word without breath is a hollow sign. It may trick us, but it does not carry the same existential reality as a word spoken from lungs and flesh. Embodied versus disembodied word. This tension is perhaps most visible in music. Think of a live singer whose voice cracks with emotion. That crack is not technically perfect, but it carries the weight of the moment. Now imagine a perfectly rendered AI song, pitch perfect, smooth, flawless. It may impress, but does it move? The embodied word carries traces of the body. The disembodied word lacks those traces. Of course, technology keeps narrowing the gap. AI voices now include simulated breaths, cracks, and imperfections. They mimic embodiment. But mimicry is not the same as being. A breath inserted by code is not the same as a breath drawn by the lungs. It can sound convincing. But does it carry the same soul? Trust and ontology, here lies the deeper risk. If synthetic words proliferate, and if we cannot distinguish between breath-born and code-born, does meaning collapse? If words can no longer be trusted to point back to embodied sources, then logos itself, the principle of order, is destabilized. We already see this erosion in the news. Deepfake videos, AI-generated articles, and synthetic speeches. The trust chain between word and body fractures. What happens to philosophy when the very unit of thought, the word, becomes unstable? Perhaps we need a new ontology of speech, one that distinguishes between embodied words, breath-rooted, lived, and synthetic words, code-rooted, generated. Not to dismiss the synthetic, but to name it clearly, to prevent collapse. Personal reflection, I wrestle with this myself. Much of what you hear in this podcast is my voice, but mediated by AI text-to-speech, shaped by synthetic processes. Does that mean these words are less authentic? I don't think so. Because the thoughts are mine, the breath behind them existed in the act of writing, even if not in the act of speaking. The synthetic layer is a bridge, not a replacement. But I also know that when I hear my cloned voice say something, I feel a jolt, a sense of alienation, as if my logos had been hijacked. This is why I remain cautious. The synthetic word is powerful, but it is also slippery. It mimics the breath of life without carrying it. Micro-reflection. When you hear a machine-generated word, do you feel it in your body or only in your mind? Pause and notice. The next time your GPS tells you to turn left, or a chatbot greets you, feel into your body. Did it land anywhere, or did it skim across the surface? That distinction matters, because words without breath can guide us, but they cannot ground us. Words without certainty. As I step back from everything we've explored in this episode, from authenticity and ownership to mirrors, mimicry, hybrids, and the philosophy of the synthetic word, I find myself circling one central truth. Language has never been about certainty. It has always been about thresholds. Each word we use is a crossing, a movement from inside to outside, from thought to sound, from private perception to public exchange. And every crossing is marked by risk. Will the other person understand me? Will this word land as I intend? Will it soothe or will it wound? That risk is not a flaw in language, it is its essence. Words are fragile bridges, and their fragility is what makes them alive. But today, a new kind of uncertainty has entered the scene. Not just will this word land, but where did this word come from? Was it born from lungs and breath, shaped by a living tongue? Or was it generated by code, assembled from probability? For most of human history, the answer was simple. Words came from bodies. You could see the speaker's lips, hear their breath, and feel their presence. Now, with AI and synthetic speech, that bond has fractured. We hear words, but do not always know whether they carry a body behind them. This isn't just a technological shift. It's a philosophical and somatic one. Because when we cannot anchor words to bodies, trust begins to wobble. In the Inversiverse, I showed how reality itself can be inverted by perception and control, how words can be used to reshape entire worldviews. In The Body Knows, I traced how words are written into muscle and tissue, leaving imprints deeper than memory. In My Inner Child Was Broken, I explored how words withheld or weaponized in childhood fracture identity. And in The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe, I gave space to the raw, shadowed emotions we are usually taught to silence. All of these explorations converge here, at the threshold of synthetic speech. Because the stakes are the same. Words shape perception, embody memory, wound or heal, silence or liberate. The difference is that now, words arrive without bodies. They arrive without the living breath that grounds them in trust, and yet they still move us. Our nervous systems still respond. Our bodies still tense or soften. Our emotions still rise or collapse. The synthetic word may not carry breath, but it still carries force. The question is whether we can remain awake to that distinction, whether we can notice when a word carries a living pulse, and when it carries only the echo of probability. Activity. Logging the synthetic word awareness requires practice. So I want to leave you with something practical, a way to feel this philosophy in your own body. For 1 week, keep a synthetic word log. Each time you encounter synthetic speech, write it down. Don't just list the moment, record your body's response. GPS voice telling you to turn left. Chatbot offering customer support. Autocorrect is altering your text. Recorded announcement on a bus or train. AI-generated caption on a video. For each encounter, pause for 10 seconds. Notice, did your breath change? Did your chest tighten or expand? Did you feel soothed, irritated, neutral, or curious? Did you trust the word instantly or hesitate? Did the word land in your body or only in your mind? By the end of the week, look back at your log. You'll likely see patterns. Maybe synthetic speech feels convenient when it comes from machines, but unsettling when blended into human contexts. Maybe you trust it for directions, but not for declarations of truth. Maybe you find it efficient, or maybe you find it alienating. This practice is not about judgment. It is about discernment. It is about retraining your nervous system to notice how words land, not just intellectually, but physiologically. Because in an age where words can come from anywhere, the body is your last compass of trust. And that, ultimately, is what my work across projects has circled. Whether in The Body Knows, where I explored how trauma etches itself in flesh, or in The Unfiltered Human on the Fringe, where I let language touch taboo emotions, or here in the Linguaverse, where I trace the philosophy of words, the core remains. Meaning is not only thought. Meaning is embodied. So treat this log as an experiment in embodiment, a way of noticing not only what you hear, but what you feel. The first step of a new arc. This brings us to the end of Episode 9, AI and Synthetic Speech. But it is not the end of a journey. It is the first step into a new one. Arc 1, the roots of language and the birth of the spell, traced how words emerged, embodied, fractured, and reclaimed themselves. Now, in Arc 2, the future and philosophy of language, we are stepping into uncharted terrain. Episode 9 opened the door with synthetic speech, words without bodies, mirrors without breath, mimicry, and hybridity. It asked us to notice what changes when words are generated rather than spoken, when logos is simulated rather than incarnated. But this is only the beginning, because language itself is not standing still. It is mutating, evolving, bending under the weight of globalization, memes, predictive text, and synthetic voices. And no language shows this more vividly than English. Episode 10. The evolution of English has always been a hybrid tongue, born of Germanic roots, reshaped by Norman French, embroidered with Latin, enriched by trade, empire, and migration. English is less a single language than a patchwork quilt. It has always been porous, always absorbing, always mutating. But in the last few decades, that mutation has accelerated. The internet birthed new grammars, hashtags, abbreviations, and emojis. Memes turned inside jokes into global idioms overnight. Predictive text began nudging our phrasing. Autocorrect created strange new hybrids. And now, AI-generated speech threatens to push English into even stranger forms. Episode 10 will ask, what happens when the world's most hybrid language collides with the age of machines? Will English fragment into countless dialects, each shaped by regional algorithms and cultural feeds? Will it flatten into a single global tongue, efficient but emptied of nuance? Will it expand into entirely new categories of expression, blending image, sound, and text into hybrid speech beyond what we now call language? We will explore how English is no longer just evolving, it is accelerating. And in that acceleration lies both risk and opportunity, the risk of losing texture and the opportunity of creating richer worlds of meaning. Where Episode 9 asked, what is a word without breath? Episode 10 will ask, what is a language that never stops mutating? So as we close this episode, I leave you with this. AI doesn't just generate words, it reshapes the meaning of speech itself. It unsettles, excites, mirrors, and mimics. It offers bridges, but also fractures trust. And yet, through it all, one truth endures. Every word carries a body in some form. Until next time, stay curious, stay awake to your own language, and remember, every word carries a body. You've been listening to the Linguaverse, James Miller.